The box sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally opened it. It wasn't because I was busy. I wasn't. I kept noticing it every time I walked through the kitchen. The small, white package with the bright green lettering and the bold promise that it could tell you where you came from. 20 years of family history and a plastic tube and a barcode. My daughter Emily had ordered the DNA kits for Christmas. At first, I thought it was cute. One of those trendy things families did now. Spit in a tube, mail it off, then laugh about being 2% Scandinavian or finding out your ancestors were farmers somewhere in Ireland. Emily had insisted we all do it together. She was 22 and excited about everything. "Come on, Mom," she'd said, pushing the box toward me that night. "It'll be fun. Dad already did his." Mark had smiled from across the table. "Yeah," he said. "Took like 30 seconds. That had been 3 weeks ago. The results had started arriving in our emails 2 days earlier. Emily got hers first, then mine. Mark's had come the same morning as mine, but he said he'd check it later. The box on the counter wasn't actually the test kit. It was the printed results Emily had ordered afterward, the family tree package. Apparently, the website offered a big, glossy breakdown of your genetic connections if enough family members participated. Emily had been thrilled when it arrived. "Mom, we can build a whole tree," she'd said. "You, me, Dad, Grandpa, everybody." But then she had left to spend a long weekend with her boyfriend in Denver, leaving the unopened envelope behind. Which meant I was the one staring at it. I poured myself a glass of wine that afternoon and finally slid a finger under the flap. Inside were several pages, color charts, ethnicity percentages, a basic family diagram. At first I skimmed it casually, mostly European, no surprises, Irish, German, English. Then I turned the page, and that's when something didn't make sense. I stared at the chart for a long time before I realized why. Emily's results were listed next to mine, but Mark's branch didn't connect to hers, at least not the way it should have. There was a line showing me as Emily's biological mother. That part was clear. But where Mark's name should have connected as the father, there was a blank space with a note that read, "Potential biological parent not detected in tested profiles." I blinked at it. Then I laughed, because it had to be wrong. DNA websites made mistakes, right? I had heard stories about that, people getting false matches, weird glitches, incorrect family connections. I flipped through the rest of the pages, assuming it would correct itself somewhere. It didn't. Every chart said the same thing. Emily was genetically related to me, but not to Mark. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with that paper in my hands for a long time. My brain kept trying to rearrange the information into something that made sense. Maybe Mark had messed up his sample. Maybe he didn't spit enough into the tube. Maybe the lab mixed something up. Because the alternative was impossible. Mark was Emily's father. He'd been there the day she was born. He'd held her before I even got to. He'd spent 22 years being her dad. There was no universe where that wasn't true. I heard the garage door open a little after 6. Mark walked in like he always did. Loosened tie, laptop bag over his shoulder, the faint smell of cold air and office coffee following him through the door. "Hey," he said, kissing the top of my head as he passed. I was still sitting at the table. The papers were spread out in front of me. He noticed immediately. "What's that?" "The DNA results Emily ordered," I said. He set his bag down. "Oh yeah? Anything interesting?" My fingers tightened around the page. "I think something's wrong with the test." He pulled out a chair across from me and sat. "What do you mean?" I slid the paper across the table. He glanced at it casually at first. Then he stopped moving. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like 5 minutes. Finally, he leaned back in the chair. "Well?" he said slowly. "That's weird." His tone was calm. Too calm. I searched his face for confusion, the same kind I felt twisting through my stomach. Instead, he looked thoughtful, like someone trying to solve a puzzle he already understood. "You don't seem very surprised," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's probably just a lab error." "That's what I thought. Those things happen. Then why didn't you check your results when they came in?" He shrugged. "I forgot." Mark had never forgotten anything in his life. He was the kind of man who kept spreadsheets for vacation budgets. I felt something small and cold begin to settle in my chest. "Can you pull them up?" I asked. "My results?" "Yes." He hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Then he stood and walked to the counter where his phone was charging. The kitchen felt suddenly quiet. The hum of the refrigerator sounded louder than usual. Mark unlocked his phone and scrolled for a while. Then he turned the screen toward me. "See?" he said. I took the phone. His results page was open. Ethnicity breakdown. DNA matches. And right there under close family matches,
was Emily's name, but next to it was a strange label. Possible extended relative. Not daughter. Not immediate family. Extended. I looked up at him. Why does it say that? Mark exhaled slowly. I don't know, but the way he said it made my stomach drop. Because suddenly I had a memory. Something small. Something from years ago. A conversation we'd had when Emily was about 10. She'd needed a blood test for something. Just routine stuff. The doctor had asked Mark about his blood type. Mark had paused before answering. At the time, I thought he just didn't remember. Now the memory replayed vividly in my head, like a scene you suddenly see from another angle. Mark, I said quietly, is there something you're not telling me? He didn't answer right away. He walked back to the table and sat down again. For a moment, he stared at the papers like they belonged to someone else. Then he said something that made my heart start pounding. Before we jumped to conclusions, he said, there might be a reasonable explanation. My mouth felt dry. What kind of explanation? He looked at me, and for the first time in 20 years of marriage, I saw real fear in his eyes. I just think, he said carefully, we should wait until Emily gets home before we talk about this. The room seemed to tilt. Why would Emily need to be here? He didn't answer. He just rubbed his hands together slowly, staring at the table. That cold feeling in my chest spread into something heavier, because suddenly I realized something worse than the possibility that Mark wasn't Emily's biological father. The worst possibility was this. Mark already knew, and had known for a long time. Mark, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. How long have you known about this? His head lifted slowly. Our eyes met, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he said something that shattered the last piece of certainty I had about my life. I didn't think the test would find it, he said. For a few seconds after he said it, I honestly thought I'd misheard him.
I kept staring at his face, waiting for him to correct himself, waiting for the words to rearrange into something that didn't feel like a crack opening under the floor of my life. But he didn't say anything else. He just sat there, elbows on the table, fingers laced together like he was holding them still. I didn't think the test would find it. My brain replayed the sentence again and again. Find what? What do you mean, find it? I asked. Mark exhaled slowly through his nose, like someone preparing to explain something complicated to a child. I mean, he said, these DNA sites usually only connect you to people who are already in the system. That doesn't answer my question. He rubbed his temple. I thought the chances were low. What chances? Another pause. Mark, I'm trying to think how to explain this without... Just say it. My voice came out sharper than I expected. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. He looked at the papers again. Emily is our daughter, he said. That's not what the test says. She is. Then why isn't your DNA connected to hers? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. That's when the anger started creeping in. It came slowly at first, like heat under my skin. Because Mark wasn't confused. He wasn't shocked. He was calculating. And that meant one thing. He already knew exactly what the test was showing. You knew this could happen, I said. He didn't respond. You knew the test might show something. Still nothing. My chair scraped against the tile as I pushed back from the table. Mark. Finally, he looked up. His face looked older than it had that morning. Tired. Like someone who had just been dragged into a conversation he'd been avoiding for decades. I knew it was possible, he said. The words felt like ice water. Possible that you're not Emily's father? That's not what I said. That's exactly what you said. No. Then explain it. He leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment. I'm trying, he muttered. Try faster. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had moved in. Mark dropped his gaze back to the table. Emily is my daughter, he said again. Legally, emotionally, in every way that actually matters. Stop talking like a lawyer. I'm not. Then stop avoiding the answer. His jaw tightened. You're asking the wrong question. Then what's the right one? He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was quieter. The right question, he said, is whether you really want to open this door. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're kidding, right? He shook his head slowly. No. Mark, we already opened it. The DNA test kicked the door off the hinges. That test doesn't tell the whole story. Then tell me the whole story. Silence filled the room again. I watched him carefully now, studying every movement.
Mark had always been good under pressure. That was part of what made him successful at work. He negotiated deals with millions of dollars without raising his voice. But tonight, there was a crack in that control. His fingers kept tapping the table. Tap, tap, tap. A nervous habit I hadn't seen since we were in our 20s. You said something, I reminded him quietly. You said you didn't think the test would find it. He nodded slightly. Yes. So what is it? Another long breath. Then he said something I never expected to hear. 20 years ago, he said, something happened that I never told you about. My stomach dropped. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt thin. What kind of something? He looked straight at me. The kind that would have destroyed our marriage. I felt my throat tighten. You cheated on me. It wasn't a question. He hesitated, then nodded once. Yes. The word landed like a stone in my chest. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. 20 years. We'd been married 24, which meant this had happened 4 years into our marriage. Back when Emily was a baby. Back when our entire life still felt new and fragile and hopeful. Who was she? I asked. Mark rubbed his face with both hands. It wasn't a relationship. That wasn't my question. It was complicated. It's not complicated, I said flatly. You either slept with someone or you didn't. I did. The honesty should have felt like progress. Instead, it made my stomach churn. When? Summer of 2003. Emily had been 2. I could picture that summer instantly. We'd taken a trip to the lake. Mark had traveled a lot for work that year. Late meetings. Conferences. At the time, I had believed every word. Was it someone from work? I asked. He nodded. A colleague. Do I know her? No. Is she still around? No. The answers came quickly now, like he'd rehearsed them. How long did it go on? His eyes dropped again. Not long. That's vague. A few weeks. I crossed my arms. And you never told me. No. You just married it. Yes. And you've lived with that secret for 20 years. He nodded again. I tried to process the information, but something about the timeline didn't sit right in my mind. If Mark had cheated 20 years ago, that still didn't explain the DNA test. Unless. The thought formed slowly, and when it did, it made my chest tighten. Mark, I said carefully, what does your affair have to do with Emily's DNA results? He didn't answer. He just stared at the table again. The silence stretched. A horrible possibility began assembling itself piece by piece in my head. No, I said. Mark's shoulders tensed. No, I repeated, shaking my head. He finally looked up. Don't jump to conclusions. You're saying the affair happened 20 years ago? Yes. And Emily is 22? Yes. Which means the timeline overlaps exactly with when she was conceived. Not exactly. Close enough. Laura, are you telling me Emily might not be yours? My voice cracked on the last word. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he said something that made the room feel like it had dropped 10 degrees. That's not the secret I was talking about. My heart stuttered. Then what is it? Mark leaned forward slightly. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. The secret, he said, is that the woman I slept with might not have been the only person involved. I stared at him. The sentence didn't make sense at first. What does that mean? He swallowed. It means, he said slowly, that if the DNA test found something, it might not be about me being Emily's father. The words took a second to land. Then they exploded in my mind. What are you saying? Mark looked exhausted now, like a man who had just run out of ways to avoid the truth. I'm saying, he said quietly, that 20 years ago, something happened that connects our family to another person. My pulse was racing. What person? He hesitated, then finally said the words that made my blood run cold. A son. The room went completely silent. A what? A son. He repeated. I felt like I couldn't hear properly. You're telling me you have another child? He shook his head quickly. I don't know. You just said. I said it's possible. How? He leaned back in the chair again, staring at the ceiling like the answer might be written there. Because the woman from that summer, he said slowly, called me 6 months later. My heart slammed against my ribs. What did she say?
His eyes closed briefly. She told me she was pregnant. For a long time after he said it, neither of us moved. The refrigerator hummed quietly behind me. Somewhere outside, a car drove past our house, tires whispering against wet pavement. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. But inside the kitchen, it felt like the world had tilted sideways. "She told you she was pregnant," I repeated. Mark nodded slowly. "And you never told me?" His eyes flicked up to mine. "No." The word landed harder than the confession about cheating. Because cheating could be stupid, weak, a mistake. But hiding a child for 20 years? That was something else. "That's not something you forget to mention," I said. "I know. You built an entire life with me. You watched Emily grow up. We went to parent-teacher conferences, birthday parties, college tours. I remember. And the whole time you knew there might be another kid out there with your DNA." His jaw tightened. "I didn't know. You just said." "I said she told me she was pregnant. That's the same thing." "No," he said quietly. "It's not." I stared at him, trying to understand the logic. "Did you ever see the baby?" "No." "Did she ever prove it was yours?" "No." "Did you even try to find out?" The hesitation before his answer told me everything. "Mark." "Yes." "You didn't." He rubbed his face again. "She told me she was keeping it. And she said she didn't want anything from me. That's convenient. It wasn't like that." "Really?" His voice hardened slightly. "She said the child wasn't my responsibility." "Why would she say that if it was yours?" "Because she knew the situation." "What situation?" Another pause. And suddenly I realized we were still missing pieces. "You're leaving something out again," I said. "I'm not trying to." "Yes, you are." "No." "Then explain why a woman would call a married man, say she's pregnant with his kid, and then tell him not to worry about it." Mark didn't respond immediately. The silence felt heavier this time, because it meant the next thing he said was going to be worse. "She didn't say it was mine," he said finally. My brain stalled. "What?" "She said it could be." "Could be?" He nodded. "Mark, that doesn't make any sense." "I know." "No, it really doesn't." I sat down again slowly. "Start from the beginning," I said. "The real beginning." He stared at the table for a moment like he was rewinding 20 years of memories. "It was a work conference," he said. "Where?" "Chicago." "When?" "June of 2003. I remembered that trip. Barely. Mark had been gone 4 days. I'd stayed home with Emily, who was still in diapers. At the time, it had felt like just another work obligation. Nothing dramatic, nothing life-altering. "She worked for another branch of the company," Mark continued. "Marketing division. Her name was Rachel." "Rachel what?" "Don't." "Why?" "Because it doesn't matter." "It matters to me. She disappeared from my life after that summer. That doesn't mean her last name stopped existing." He sighed. "Rachel Carter. The name meant nothing to me." "Was she married?" "No." "Did you know her before the conference?" "Not really." "So what happened?" Mark leaned back in his chair again. "There was a group of us from different offices," he said. "Workshops during the day, networking events at night." "Networking." He ignored the sarcasm. "One night we ended up at a bar with a few people from the conference. I could picture it easily. Hotel bar. Loud music. Too many drinks. Classic story. You got drunk?" "Yes." "And slept with her?" "Yes." "How many times?" "Twice." The bluntness made my stomach twist. "During the conference?" "Yes." "So that was it. 2 nights and then you flew home and played happy husband?" "Yes." The honesty was almost cruel. "And then 6 months later she calls you out of nowhere to say she's pregnant?" "Yes." "That's when she said it could be yours?" "Yes." "Who else could it have been?" Mark didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice sounded almost embarrassed. "Someone else from the conference." I blinked. "You're kidding." "No." "She slept with 2 guys at the same conference?" "Yes." "And you didn't think that detail was important earlier?" I was getting there. "Who was the other guy?" Mark hesitated again. "That's the part I didn't tell you." "Why not?" "Because he's not a stranger." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" Mark rubbed his neck slowly. "It means," he said, "that the other guy wasn't someone from another branch." "Then who?" His eyes met mine. "The other guy was someone you know." My pulse quickened. "Mark." He looked genuinely miserable now. "Don't make me say it like this." "Like what?" "Like I'm detonating a bomb." "Just say it." He swallowed.
The other guy was David. The name hit me like a slap. David. He nodded. My brother. For a second, the world went completely quiet. Mark's younger brother David had been part of our lives since the beginning. Family barbecues, holidays, birthdays. He was Emily's favorite uncle when she was little. You're telling me, I said slowly, that you and your brother slept with the same woman during the same work conference? Yes. And she got pregnant? Yes. And she told the baby could belong to either of you? Yes. My chest felt tight. What did David say about it? Mark stared at me. He never knew. I felt like the floor dropped. You never told him? No. Why the hell not? Because Rachel didn't want anything from either of us. That's not an answer. She said she was leaving the city. So I let it go. You let it go, I repeated. Yes. You just erased a possible child from your life? He shook his head. I didn't erase anything. I just didn't chase it. That's the same thing. It wasn't my place. Your place? I laughed bitterly. Mark, you might have had a kid. Might have. And instead of finding out, you buried the entire situation. Yes. The simplicity of his answers made my anger burn hotter. Does David still not know? No. 20 years later? No. I leaned back in my chair, trying to absorb everything. Then another thought hit me. A worse one. Mark. He looked up. If that kid exists? Yes. And if they ever took one of these DNA tests? His face went pale. Yes. They could show up in Emily's results. Yes. My stomach twisted again, because suddenly the chart on the table made horrifying sense. Emily wasn't connected to Mark, but she was connected to me, which meant the mystery person in the DNA system wasn't Mark's child. They were related to Emily another way, a way that made my voice shake when I said it. Mark. If the child belonged to David instead of you. He closed his eyes. Then Emily's test would show them as a relative. Yes. What kind of relative? He hesitated, then said the word quietly. Half-sibling. The paper in front of me suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Emily has a half-brother. Possibly. And he might already be in the DNA system. Yes. The room spun slightly, because that meant the test hadn't just uncovered Mark's affair. It had uncovered a person. Someone who had been alive for 20 years. Someone connected to our family. Someone who might already know we existed. I stared at the chart again.
At the empty space labeled Potential Biological Parent Not Detected. Then at the line showing an unknown close match. Mark, I said slowly. His eyes opened. What? I think the test already found him. The color drained from his face. What? I turned the page toward him. There's a match here, I said. He leaned forward. His eyes scanned the paper. And I watched the exact moment he saw the name. The exact moment his entire body went rigid. Because the name wasn't unfamiliar to him. It was someone he recognized. And judging by the expression on his face, that realization terrified him.